I'm also looking here that he also did a animated action comedy musical film called The Wonderful World of Puss in Boots.
We definitely should have done that film instead.
Honestly, I don't know. I was so excited by every word that came out of your mouth that when you said the word puss, I thought it was going a totally different way.
Horny bugger.
We're 2 weeks into 2025, and if your year isn't in tatters now, you've done something wrong. Welcome to the second edition of our Coming of Age series. This week, it's The Boy and the Heron by Studio Ghibli. Now the tough bit. Orakasa no 3 Teku es e yokoso. I'm Alex Clinton. I'm joined by Chandler Monk.
What did that mean? Hi, what did that mean?
James Robbins.
Hi.
In English now, welcome to the Three Takes of Stupidity podcast. Tori or Yakamoto? I think I've totally fucking butchered that. That means let's go birds. Let's get birds, because I couldn't... I wanted to write let's go birdies.
That's brilliant. Let's go birdies. Nice. Like it.
Can I be really annoying?
Can you do it in English?
As Alex Sand said, we are back with the second
Alex Sand.
the second episode of our Coming of Age series. Studio Ghibli, the studio co-founded by Hayao Miyazaki, a legendary studio, and it feels like another movie we need to do justice. Bit like last week. However, before we get into that, as always, what have you been up to, boys?
I'll go first.
Son.
Shut up.
Olakun? That means you're a child.
I went to Dublin for the weekend. I have a friend who lives out there. Spend a weekend with him and another friend who we always live with at uni. It was really good fun. Drank a lot more Guinness than I thought I would because I'm not a big Guinness drinker, but it was good.
The true nectar of life.
The true nectar of life. Guinness is also a meal.
Yeah, but it's actually low calorie compared to most beer.
It is, yeah.
A lot of iron.
Lots of iron. Yeah, there you go. Nice.
No split the G. No split the G chat. It's got cringe.
Yeah. And still unemployed, so been applying for jobs, went on an interview, see how that goes. And yeah, that's basically been my week. I haven't watched much. I started watching the season 1 of What If, because I'd never seen it before and it popped up and I had nothing else to watch. And it's quite good.
What is it?
What If is an animated Marvel show of like, what if the Avengers all died essentially before Loki attacked?
Every episode is a different parallel world of similar characters to what you're used to.
Exactly. And
the
it's
multiverse.
Like, what if one big event? Yeah. What if one big event didn't happen? Essentially, like how would it change? And each episode is slightly different.
What if
it's
someone else was Captain America? And what if such and such got such and such? What if someone else became Thor?
The weirdest one I just watched was What If Everyone Was Zombies. That was a good quite episode. A funny one.
I liked the show before. It ended up with an overarching narrative, which I don't want to spoil it for you if you just started, but I would have preferred it if it was just a Simpsons-esque, Scooby-Doo-esque Monster of the Week, episode of the week. No overarching story. Just give me an individual story every week in a different parallel world. And then you can do something with those characters later. But it became a big thing. It's like, I enjoyed it.
Fair enough.
They've Rick and Morty'd themselves.
I think a little.
Alex, what have you been up to?
I haven't been to Dublin. I haven't drank any Guinness. I did have a pack of potatoes, though. Don't know if that counts. I have actually watched some TV. I watched, I started Rogue Heroes on the BBC.
Oh, nice. Season 1 or season 2?
I'd already watched season 1 and I was very excited for season 2. It's a very good show.
Is it good?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of finally we get to see Italians die, which we never get to see Italians die in World War II movies. It's all just Germans. We should remember that they were the OG fascists. It always gets sideswiped.
You've managed, so far we've mentioned all 3 of the Axis powers in the start of this episode.
Oh my God. Oh my God. All I'm going to say is season 2 is on the list to watch, but season 1 came out so long ago, I forgot what happened, and I feel like I need to rewatch season 1 before I watch season 2, annoyingly, which I feel like you have to do with most TV nowadays.
I'm not sure you do. I also watched Primeval America that's just come out on Netflix. It's like a Western thing, but it's the way I explained it to someone recently was it's really predictable and boring, but at the same time it's really fucking good. There's a lot of like it's like new TV where they just don't care about killing people off. Like you'll get really into a character during an episode, you'll be like, oh, this guy's great, this is fantastic, and then there'll just be a fight scene, and just get shot in the face, and you're like, ah, okay. Back to the start again. but at the same time, you were like, this guy's totally going to die. He's just going to eat shit because he's not a main character.
I'm assuming it's not related at all to the, I think it was a BBC series from
It's not related to Primeval.
Not to Primeval. What a show. Portals, dinosaurs.
It is a Western based in
person.
semi-fact.
Damn.
It's good. It's good.
Fair enough. James?
Have I watched anything new? I watched my football club fail to win against a non-league club in 90 minutes and have to go to extra time.
He supports
that was
Tottenham.
Depressing. Just after we beat Liverpool, which wasn't depressing. I went to Bristol over the weekend. A friend of mine is in the Merchant Navy, so before he goes on a ship actually, I'm going to call it a big boat, because if you call a ship a boat, he gets really angry.
Is this just before he goes to be on SAS Rogue Heroes?
Yes, he's actually going on SAS Rogue Heroes.
He's going straight to Rome now to kill Italians.
He is. He'll be going on a cargo vessel. He is. I think he's a navigator, and he'll be on that for 4 or so months. And he goes, I believe, at the end of the week, and he needs to fly out to Aarhus in Denmark before he goes.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Safe trip to your friend.
Having seen Penguins of Madagascar, I know that a navigator is very important, because when they're on the plane, the navigator does get them lost. So good luck to him. And remember to always ask the doll on the dashboard.
None of you sang.
Huh?
Can't believe I told you he's flying to Aarhus and none of you sang.
Our house in the middle of a street. Is that what you wanted from us?
That's basically all I wanted, yeah.
I thought because he's in the Navy, you wanted us to sing "In the Navy." In the Navy.
No,
5 seconds. 5 seconds.
No copyright.
I was going to sing "Rule Britannia," but that's not in my nature. Get the elephant out of the room. This is an animated movie, a Japanese animated movie from the equivalent of level of stardom as a Disney animated movie. Hayao Miyazaki is a legend. He came out of retirement to write this film. He's 84 years old. He has produced umpteen movies, some that you may have heard of, My Neighbor Totoro, and also Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away. Did I mention Howl's Moving Castle? And The Boy and the Heron is his latest movie. Came out in 2023 and is another Oscar winner. So another movie we have to take very seriously. Don't worry, I'm sure we'll be back to the fun and games next week.
So if anyone hasn't watched, listen to this and then watch that film, and then there's other movies there for you to watch, and then you'll have a full catalogue of anime.
Get a housekeeping out of the way. After losing his mother during the war, young Mahito moves to his family's estate in the countryside. There's a series of mysterious events that lead to him to a secluded ancient tower, home to a mischievous grey heron. When Mahito's new stepmother disappears, who's also his aunt, by the way, he follows the grey heron into the tower and enters a fantastical world shared by the living and the dead. As he must embark on an epic journey with the heron as his guide, Mahito must uncover the secrets of this world and the truth about himself. As mentioned, this film is an Oscar winner. It has a 96% fresh rating on the tomato meter and an 88% popcorn meter, which is the fan opinion. And on IMDb, it is rated 7.4 out of 10. So very, very critically acclaimed animated movie, and our second critically acclaimed movie of the series so far.
We're picking all the greats for you.
Second critically acclaimed and second animated. What a start we're having, honestly.
So guys, I know you were deeply scarred and I can still see the wounds from Digimon. the movie, I think it's fair to say this is very different and that you can't put all anime in one box. What are your initial thoughts?
So I would agree this is very, very different from Digimon.
I mean, it's not hard to agree. You have to agree.
This is very different to Digimon. This is an actual film and it is very beautifully animated. Very, like, the animation style is lovely to watch. And for the most part, it is a cohesive story, unlike Digimon was.
For the most part. Yeah, I mean, it not being in 3 individual episodes is very helpful for the story.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful thing to look at. Digimon probably was, but for the quality of the time, you know.
The Digimon movie did have excellent animation, genuinely. But yeah, it's more story structure that was the problem there. This movie has its own quirks with story structure, and that is in the sense of, as Westerners, it is not quite what we're used to. This is surprisingly the first Studio Ghibli movie I've watched, and I did find the story structure not hard, but different. It's not a 3-act story. It's not a 3-act hero story as what we would be used to from a Hollywood movie.
I mean, yeah, but the story structure isn't that hard to follow in of itself. Like, you're following Mahito's point of view, right? Like, you're always watching what Mahito does. Right?
He's in every scene, I think.
No, there is a scene where he's not in it, when you're seeing, like, his dad's reaction to him going missing.
Yes, I think that's the only one. And honestly, that was a bit, not jarring, but it did come out of nowhere to me. It was necessary.
But anyway, like, the story itself is not hard to follow. Yes, of course, it's confusing in ways of, like, oh, what the hell's going on there? What the hell's going on there? Blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, bits and pieces are revealed to you at the correct points. Anything too major to not hard to handle with the story structure in of itself.
Very confusing story. But it both is very confusing and then very simple. It goes from, like, you have no idea what's going on, to we're now going to go into this castle. Remember the castle we spoke about earlier? This is where the Heron lives. So then there's a little man inside the Heron. You're like, what the fuck?
That is one thing that is never truly explained, and I don't get it.
Yeah, why is that? Yeah, why? So the Heron. The Heron is initially the for the first hour, he's the antagonist of the movie.
Yeah.
So Mahito has, spoilers here. Mahito has, as mentioned in the bio, he's moved to the countryside. The film is set in 1943 during the Pacific War, and his mum is unfortunately killed in a fire when a hospital is bombed, presumably.
She is seared.
Just very quickly about this, the scene right at the beginning where we obviously learn of his mother's death. For me, I like, even as I know beautiful is not the right word, but you know, it's like the animation is beautiful,
captivating.
Right? Yeah, I don't think that scene is necessarily needed. I think it would have been better for the film to eke that out in Mahito's flashbacks that you see slightly later on, like when he's moved to the countryside. I don't necessarily think you need to see what happened. It could be explained in dialogue, like it is.
Are you mentioning not seeing the city's on fire, the hospital on fire during the bombing, or do you mean so there's a scene where Mahito is having a dream as he's throughout the movie he is traumatized by it. Mahito's journey is about coming to terms with his mother's death, and there is a scene where he dreams her. It is stunning animation, but I was a little bit, whoa, that is brutal, basically her on fire. And the fire is wonderfully stylized throughout the movie. In another one of his films as well, there is a little living of fire with a smiley face, which is also very stylized. It's quite a common trope in his movies. This is quite different to that. But basically his mum is burning on fire and then going towards the light. And it is... I did, as beautiful as it was, I found it quite heart-wrenching, quite brutal to see.
I completely agree, but I think at the start of the film, you don't necessarily need to see that the mum died in a fire. I think that can be eked out subtly and also in those flashbacks more then it's needed to be shown at the start.
I think there are small details in it though that you get from it. She dies in a hospital. She's a nurse. Maybe you'd maybe gloss over that in a flashback.
Yeah, fair.
And then she gets seared, absolutely charcoaled.
Oh God! I mean, it's true, and it's not like they avoid showing you. So I wrote down, I think kids can watch this movie. They might not understand it, but they will enjoy it.
I think it's got a weirdly high rating,
but it is an adult film. Has it?
I think so.
This would have been a kid. This would have been a kids movie in 2001. Not a kids movie, but kids would have been okay seeing it in 2001.
No, but hang on. Is your thing of that like skewed? Since I kept saying like I've watched From Dusk Till Dawn when I was like 10.
No, because
which like in this, as we've revealed in this podcast, I watched so many films way too bloody young.
Oh no, it's a 12. It's a 12, which is still quite old.
So yeah, I would say I think kids could watch this film with their parents. They won't understand anything.
Yeah, that, as Alex said, it was a 12.
What kid is watching this film with his parents while they're off their face on acid?
Yeah, so Alex has mentioned acid twice without us mentioning that this film is very abstract.
Watch this film, you'll know what I mean.
But as I say, for the first hour of the film, other than the Heron, it is based in reality, and that reality is stunning. But the animation of the cars and all the vehicles, and there's the tanks are all wonderfully stylized yet realistic and beautiful. Every single wide shot, it could be a painting. But then that is also slightly contrast to quite basic character design for the main characters, except for the old people that are
heavily stylized.
But it's all fine line work, and that is fine line work allows for extra expression, and it allows for more motion, easier motion, because if they're too rigid and detailed with lighting effects, shadows, it can be hard for them to have motion. In this film, it doesn't have that problem, and you do get wonderful expressions on all the characters' faces.
Yeah, the note I had when the old ladies showed up was, what the fuck are they designed like?
So my partner is not really an anime
dwarf,
fan.
Surely.
That's what I thought. My partner's not really an anime fan, but she's actually seen more Studio Ghibli films than me, and she goes, he always makes the old people look so ugly and small.
Ageist.
Ironic, because how old is he, James?
He's like 84.
But you mentioned like all the tanks and everything. I think I read somewhere that this film is based on a lot of his experiences when he was younger, during the war.
Mm.
So that like there's bits where they're walking past soldiers and they like salute, which I thought was a weird scene to put in, considering like the war is mentioned at the start. Like obviously the whole Tokyo gets bombed, his mum gets char grilled, he leaves, walks past all the soldiers and the tanks. His dad's making canopies for planes. It's like there's a lot of things in this that you don't really need because it never pops up again.
I did, but there are, through the first hour when we are in the real world, there are more hints towards the war in the sense of the he's being adopted. His dad is having a baby with his aunt, now stepmom, and at that estate there are a bunch of kind of like the Seven Dwarves, small old women there that are there to look after him and have served the family and looked after the family for generations. And this Heron has been causing havoc and kind of attacking him and stuff. And he wants to build a bow and arrow to basically attack it. He tries to hit it with a wooden sword, of which it breaks. And when he wants to build that bow and arrow and also sharpen his knife so he can whittle to make it, he steals some cigarettes from his dad's room and trades them with one of the old men. And then one of the old women comes out begging, basically groveling, saying, I'll get you a real bow and arrow. And he's like, why? Is it for the cigarettes? And she's like, yeah. And they obviously, things are rationing. And there's also earlier on when the stepmom comes home with a lot of food, sweet treats, and they're like, oh my God, it smells amazing. And they're going mad for all these delicious foods that they obviously cannot get because it's wartime.
Like those bits that you can definitely see are based on the writer's experiences. The one thing that in this bit, that in this sort of first hour of the film, that's never truly explained, or I think you have to infer quite a lot, is when he goes to school in his first day in his new school, and he obviously gets roughed up a little by other students. He then takes it upon himself to smash himself in the head with a rock.
Yes, that earns it the 12 rating because that includes self-harm
and blood.
It was quite brutal.
He doesn't need to hit himself in the face.
Yeah, I sort of wrote down on my notes, I was like, not to gloss over self-harm, or, if you're going through things, please talk to someone. But like, I don't think it's ever explained what he was thinking at the time of why he did it to himself.
So you lead me onto a point I wrote down while watching this film, and I found there was no exposition, really. You were meant to infer everything you get from characters' expressions and their actions and how they deliver their words. The only exposition there was about his mum dying and the hospital bombed at the start. Otherwise, there's not a huge... And moving. Otherwise, there's not a huge exposition at any points. You see him get bullied. You see when he arrives at school, if you look at all the other characters' faces, they are disgusted by the thought of a new kid. He's very much seems like a kid struck with grief. Who didn't want to move, doesn't want this new mum, misses his mum, obviously, struggling with the wartime in his world. He's very stoic. He says things in one-liners. He's not really bothered about anyone. And if you look at how he's drawn at the start of the movie compared to when he's in the other world, and not just how he expressions, but the actions he takes, he is almost less animated. Has less positive expressions on his face, very muted expressions, whereas a lot of other characters may be smiling around him. He is very like flat-faced, straight-line mouth, nothing really going on there. The stepmom is struggling with morning sickness, and he's told repeatedly that she kind of wants to see him and that he should see him, and he doesn't go really until later pushed, and he's not warm at any time. And until another scene in the movie, she seems generally warm. There was a moment where she does see him asleep in the bed where I thought she was being sweet, but also she did have quite a stoic look on her face. I think she's obviously struggling with that. Is her sister's child that she is now saying that I will be the mum of, and that is a part of her journey in the film that comes into play later on.
Can I gather down this family dynamic? Because I think I got this from the movie, but I wasn't entirely sure.
Okay.
Barbecued mother, sister of the newly cremated, marries or is being ploughed by new dad.
Being ploughed?
Not new dad, by dad.
By dad, sorry. So there's dad, there's two women, one is cooked, the other one is baking.
She does have a bun in the oven, yes.
She does have a bun in the oven. A child, yeah. How long has this been going on? Did she have a bun in the oven previous to the other mum dying?
So it does say
it's a couple of years,
because in the one line of exposition that you get, he does say a year after his mum died.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but she's quite far along in this process. He moved on
he's
real
moved
fast.
On it's wartime. There's about 5 men of age in the town.
And it is voiced by Christian Bale, so
not to James it wasn't.
I watched it in Japanese with English subtitles, as I thought the other boys would watch it in English. So thought to be honest, I don't think we'll have too much of a different experience. To be honest, from what I read, there's no real differences. But the cast...
Yes, can you speak Japanese? James?
It's an often thing.
There you go. So basically, you got the same from us.
No, but it's an often thing in anime where it's less so nowadays than it was before. But English dubs and foreign dubs would take a lot of liberties, depict characters completely differently, change sentences and words in them, so you don't get the artist's intention of what it was, and sometimes the story can be quite different. I know an easy example of big one is Dragon Ball Z, where the lead character is very heroic in the English one, where in the Japanese version he is not heroic at all. He's an idiot who just wants to fight things. Whereas he is a Superman character in the English version.
Does that match up with Japanese culture though? Like
it's just the characterization.
Western culture.
No, that's just the characterization in this specific in this specific case where the writer he didn't want to write a hero. He wanted to write someone that is doing heroic acts, but ultimately it's for his own desires. He's not inherently he's less good than you think. It is the whole point. But the original English dubbing completely annihilates that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for Squid Game, it's apparently for like season 1 and for season 2. Because funnily enough, I actually watched that in Korean with English subtitles, but there's a lot of subtlety difference between what they're actually saying and what is presented to you as the English dub or the English subtitles. So yeah, apparently like a lot of subtlety if you can actually understand Korean.
I also think that when you watch anime with dub, it's not as noticeable that it's been recorded in a different language, whereas when you watch things like Squid Game, where it's people speaking and their mouth is moving a lot more than what they were actually saying, it's very off-putting.
It's like Petit Flu adverts from when we were children, where they were all clearly French.
I know it's disgusting to have French children on our TV.
Alex is being the most racist he's ever been on in one episode.
And he's loving it.
I'd recommend you guys and anyone to have a look at the dubbing process in animation, because it is an art form in itself, in how they tried their best to match up the language with the mouth movements that are ultimately in a different language. And sometimes I think in dubs, and they definitely do, but they use wide shots or shots not of characters to get away with extra stuff, to say more, because they can show a character off screen talking. However, having watched plenty in Japanese or Korean shows, that happens in those shows as well in the native language. So it is a really incredible and skilled process, just such as Foleying in movies of audio, which is another thing. The Foleying in this movie, as there isn't in the real world, I found there was less music to help differentiate when there was lots of music in the fantastical world later on. The Foleying in the movie is incredible, and you really get to experience it because of the silence that is there, whether it's a tree branch or just something being put down, or the weight of the character walking, etc. I think Miyazaki wanted to really identify the difference between the real world and the fantastical world by a lot of that, and how the characters needed to move really realistic and move really heavy. Because obviously we've all played video games and seen animation. Sometimes things can look weightless and like it's not really interacting with anything. And it truly is exceptionally animated.
Yeah, as we said before, like the film is beautiful to look at. I'm actually really happy you touched on the music, because one of my notes in the film was, even both in the real world and the fantastical world, the music is beautiful, like throughout. Like even there's a bit, I can't remember which world it's in, but there's a bit where you see the eye of the heron. It might be in the real world just before we make the switch, but it like the camera focuses on the eye of the heron, and it plays that really distorting sound. And even though that sound is meant to distort you and to like make you aware that something's not right, even those sounds are still beautifully done, and it's still, the whole film is beautiful to listen to, essentially.
Are you talking about the scene in the castle where he has the heron puts his mum on the sofa thing?
No, I think I'm talking about literally one just before, when the heron is on the water.
Oh, where he tries to shoot with a bow and arrow.
I think so, yeah.
So yeah, we've alluded to a fantastical world a lot. For the first hour, you would be resigned to thinking that this is quite a grounded movie with a bit of oddness creeping in with the heron. The heron is weird. It's lingering around the kids. It's being the stepmom says, "Oh, the heron normally keeps itself away. It must be greeting you." And until the heron appears on his windowsill and speaks, which I thought was one of the old people entering the room, because it's spoken off screen, and it's not. It's the heron, and then it has human teeth.
Yeah, yes. The heron gets more and more terrifying.
The heron is terrifying, and he ends up attacking the heron. The heron destroys his wooden sword. He ends up making a bow with some of the heron's feathers, and because those feathers, we're learning things are magical now. Those feathers, it says it's his flight number 7 feather, and because he's lost those, you could see almost more of the humanness coming out his mouth. And the Heron eventually, the stepmom goes missing, and they send out a search party, and he learns of the tower which is where people often go missing, and his great granduncle, they called him I don't know what they called him in the dub for you. In the sub, he was called the great granduncle.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
he disappeared himself and was the one that supposedly built the tower. We learn later that he built it around something that just fell from the sky. She's gone missing, and Mojito is led there alongside one of the old people, Kiriko, and the Heron has led him there. Once he's in there, he manages to shoot the Heron in the beak it becomes almost like a homing arrow because of the feather. And once the beak is damaged, there is just a full human head coming out the Heron's mouth.
Well, there's only ever a head. There's never a full body. Very upsetting. No. The head makes it more terrifying.
The wings turn a bit handy.
Yes.
Which he is genuinely creepy.
It is very creepy to look at that Heron when the man is half out of it. And again, this is the one thing that, as Alex alluded to before, the story is at one time is very confusing, but at the other time it's very simple. One thing that's never explained is why there is a small man inside a heron. Like, it's like at no point do they say this guy went missing and we needed to bring him back in a heron suit or something like that, just to explain everything else is sort of explained at one point or another, but the actual heron itself, and considering that it's titular, it's never explained why.
The heron is a mythological tank, because every time he gets swallowed into it, he becomes the heroine. The heroine? He becomes the heron.
Chasing the dragon.
At some point, he becomes the heroine. He becomes the heron. Every time the heron swallows, he goes down into the heron, becomes heronable, and starts flying around. And then every so often, he'll just pop his head out, have a look around, go back into the heron, flap about a bit again.
So
it's a mythological tank.
Did that just come to you, Alex?
Yeah.
Because I can see you getting so excited about that.
I think it's a little bit simpler than that, and I do think the answer, we're told what the heron is later on, although that he does behave a little bit differently to the others. But the heron leads them into this tower, and we see briefly an old man who's told to be the master. And the master has sent the heron to be the guide of the kid, of Mojito, even though the heron seems to just want to kill him.
He does.
To be honest, the heron does not want this job at all. He does not want this responsibility.
Yeah, you're right. And at every point, the heron seems like he's going to kill Mojito.
The heron is an ass. I put the heron's being a dick again at one point. They fall through the floor. And supposedly that we learn that the only people that can hear the heron speak and the master speak and the guide are people of Mojito's bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
The old lady who has accompanied him Kiriko actually cannot hear anything, but she can still experience the world. He ends up waking up in a new world, and in that world there are a lot of birds, which that I don't think was explained. Why there were loads of birds?
No,
except that the master brought them in.
Yeah.
So he likes birds. Maybe he was a bird watcher.
I was going to say the same thing.
He's a twitcher.
So yeah, and we get into this fantastical world, and I think as the viewer, you are supposed to be following along with Mahito's journey. So you're also not supposed to be knowing what really is going on until, as I said before, it drip feeds the information to you. However, at this point, I think the film did sort of lose me because it just became so fucking weird.
It is really confusing, abstract, and you're not shown. You're shown rather than told, which is normally
fine.
What you want. Which is normally what you want, but it is odd. I would say I think you're right in the fact that we're only meant to know as much as Mojito knows. I'd also say he's not a happy kid.
No.
And he borderline doesn't care that he's in another world. He's just like, I need to find my stepmom, And
I think he's doing that as I think he's more finding. I think at this point in the story of when he's trying to find Natsuko, he's doing it more of a sense of duty more than love.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with you.
And I think only through his adventure in the world is he learning, as you know, his coming of age story happens of him learning how to deal with his grief and moving on. And that comes out in the love that he and his determination to help his new stepmother / aunt. But again, I think what's going on.
That was the worst thing I've ever heard. That was Sweet Home Alabama.
It's genuinely as well what I thought as well. When stepmom and aunt, I was like, oof, yikes. And it's at this point that I went to my partner and I asked her, I was like, it's a bit weird, isn't it? And she's like, I was like, wouldn't it be like if you passed away and I married your sister, like that would be so weird. And she's like, well, yeah, but as someone that loves the two of you, you just want the people you care about to find happiness. And I think that is a valid point, but I also was like, I don't like it.
Was this your way of trying to get a hall pass?
Absolutely not. It sounds like I was getting given one for if she passed it. I don't want that. I'm okay.
You go for it. You go for it, big dog.
I was like, I don't agree with you.
So here's a question. As you both know, and the listeners will now know, my partner is one of an identical twin. So what would be the case for me?
It's still wrong on so many levels.
Not right.
It's definitely not right. I completely agree with you. But anyway, going back to the film. So again, as I said, I think in this fantastical world, this is where the film starts to lose me, because I think the things that you occur, like as you say, like him moving through his journey in his adventure, I just don't think the allegories of what it's trying to say work, to be honest. You as I said, at points this is a very simple story, and as he moves through it, you can see how he's maturing. He's, you know, going as he finds the way to love and love what will be his new family, while also grieving and moving on properly from what his previous family was. I feel like some of the actual things he goes through with the parakeets and the other types of birds and things like that, I just think the sort of allegories and metaphors it's trying to put across don't land.
Oh, maybe they do, but you have to be in Birdland to make them land.
Or you need to be on acid, as we've said before.
All that.
I think I disagree.
Do you think by this point that it's become Alice in Wonderland?
Yeah, maybe.
It is very Alice in Wonderland.
That was when he fell through the floor. A little part of my brain, somewhere deep in the darkest part of my brain, went, Alice in Wonderland's happening. I was like, maybe it is, maybe it is. And then it does become very much that. He goes through the gate with all the pelicans for some reason, even though the pelicans can just fly around the gate. They all seem to want to go through this magical gate.
There is magic in this world. I don't think we can. This always happens. My partner does it as well. I think things are quite easy to explain when, the pelicans can fly over the gate, but we know it's a magical world. Like they haven't landed.
They fly back.
They had to force it open.
But here's the difference, right? Like, it's fine having magic in movies or in, you know, limbo worlds, as this is. This is basically him being in limbo. The problem is when the story breaks its own laws. That's the point. Like, you know,
I don't think it does.
I'm a massive fan of sci-fi, Doctor Who, things like that, right? It irks me when I watch that type of stuff. It only annoys me when something that they've set down is a law and then they go back on it. So it's like, as Alex says, they can't fly over the gate. They have to fly through the gate. But then 4 seconds later, they can fly over the gate.
Back.
That's the sort of point. That's what I think he's trying to say. It's fine to have magic.
I don't think this film does that, to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it does break any of its rules,
right?
Per se. So he meets. So a thought for you guys, and I'll be clear. This is not my own thought, but it did help me with a bit more understanding of the movie. Mahito's on this journey in the other world to save Natsuko, and we know there's the master. So ultimately, he's gonna have to find the master. We know before what we find out at the end, towards the end of the movie, that this is the master's world. And someone pointed out that the world ultimately is a representation of one's ego, as there is so he meets another Kiriko, a younger Kiriko, and we know that his great granduncle or his great great uncle went missing years ago, and that she had served the family for many generations. So is that Kiriko maybe not just a representation of what he knows in that world from his real world, and then also anything of the laws in that movie are ultimately a representation of his ego. So we can allude that he liked, as we said, like birds, there's pelicans, and then these really fat parakeets that are armed and dangerous, which are quite funny. And he also has these little, we find later on that the master wants to find a successor for the world. And there's the I think it was the Wara Wara creatures that were almost like
unborn
souls.
babies.
The unborn babies, they are souls.
The adipose.
Yeah, and
adipose. Yes, great Doctor Who reference.
Yes.
Sorry.
The world is a representation of one's ego, thus one's grief, and it represents death and the cycle of life and death. And then it helps us learn a lot more about the characters once we realise that this world is ultimately a creation of a person.
Yes, but I can see where the thing of like this is his ego. However, the people that live within the world, I think it's here within the space of about 5 to 7 minutes in watching the film, you clearly understand that there is some time loop happening essentially.
Yeah, we meet a young character called Himi.
Wait, hang on. So like he makes the leap that the woman that saved him is Kiriko. He makes that himself, that she must be a younger version.
She's wearing the same outfit, and she has dolls of all the other old people that are like wards to help protect him.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next scene is who we find out to be called Lady Himi save the Wara Wara as they are going to be born using fire. And I think it's a pretty simple guess at that point to go, okay, Lady Himi is the embodiment of, is either his mother or the embodiment of, and we later find out it is his mother. So I think in these two scenes, which are back to back, you go, right, there is definitely some like time skipping, time looping thing going on here. So I don't think that fully extends into the thing of, okay, this world is someone's ego, because obviously the people that live within it are only there because of some time looping.
Are you saying that this is Granduncle's ego, or are we saying that it's...
This is Granduncle's ego.
But could it not be the ego of small boy, whose name escapes me?
Mojito.
It's not the mint alcoholic drink mojito. It's mojito.
It's mojito. Little mojito. I would put that it's not Granduncle's ego. This is in Mojito's mind from his concussion that he sustained with the rock blow to the head.
I'm not having that, because it is the oldest crappy trope that is put to so many films, TV, anime, everything ever. I think the classic one is always that when Ash at the start of Pokemon got struck by Pikachu, everything is a dream, and that's why he never grows up. And he's actually in a coma, and it doesn't actually happen.
He got
it's like this. It's to say there's a theory in The Simpsons as well that pretty much everything that happens after season 4 is in Homer's mind. I think it's the episode where Bart shakes up the duff can really, really a lot, and then it like explodes, and then he meets God at the end of that episode, and then everything is just in his mind. So yeah, but anyway, moving on.
It's too old a trope. I think the only film that does that is Inception.
But that's baked into the lore of the film.
Which is like, and I think Christopher Nolan, I'm pretty sure he just read this trope and goes, that shit, I'm going to make an incredible movie about this. And he did.
But anyway, like, as I say, I think as he moved through this fantastical world, the thing that doesn't land for me again is like you get to meet the parakeets, and you do find out it's a time loop. Like Lady Himi shows him a door.
It's a time loop for her, but it's not necessarily a time loop. It's clear that So later we're introduced to this room where it takes you to other worlds. And yes. It's alluded to. She's actually going to go to another world.
No,
not necessarily back in time.
But I think there's a scene between the one we were talking about, the Waha Waha going away. Like, we go back to normal day, and I think it's the only scene that Mahito's not in, where one of the old ladies says to his dad, your wife, your ex-wife, the one who passed away, went missing for 1.5 years and then came back. I think it's at that point... Sorry, I think it's then the scene after she runs through the doors with Mahito and shows him his dad. Shows him his dad running towards the tower. And at that point you go, oh, so basically this is definitely his mum being missing for the 1.5 years earlier on in her life. And then that's why she goes back and is happy, as the old lady said, because she's got to spend this time with Mahito grown up a little.
So I gathered it as
and she explains that as well. Right at the end of the film.
There's definitely time fuckery going on in that world, but I don't think it's it is his mum, but it's not his mum that died. It is a different mum from a different parallel world that happens to be basically the same.
No, it's not his mum from a different parallel world. It is his mum. It is 100%. It's not his mum from a parallel world or anything like that. They say in the story, his mum went missing for 1.5 years, right?
Yeah, no.
So she went into the tower, was missing for 1.5 years, and then left through a different door, which is obviously 1.5 years later than when she left. And in the story, the old lady says she came back happier, right? And she says it at the end of the film that she is happy that she got to spend this time with Mahito, help him in his journey of dealing with her own death, and learning how to love Natsuko as his new stepmother / still aunt.
I think you're
right.
It's not,
so it's not a parallel world or anything. It is his mother.
I think you're right, but I don't think anything changes regardless of any two scenarios, ultimately. But yours does make sense because, if she came back happier, it's alluded to. So this is the thing where you say things don't land. As we're talking about this yourself and as you are coming to analyse the movie and realise the subtlety of what it's trying to tell us. And that's the thing.
That's not subtle at all. That bit is not subtle at all.
But this movie doesn't offer you things on a plate, and that it does make it a hard watch for sure.
I think that bit is not subtle at all. That as Alex said earlier, like at points it's a very confusing story, and at points it's a very simple story. That's why I don't think these these adventures that he goes on, these challenges he goes on through the trying to defeat the parakeets or trying to stop the parakeet king going towards his granduncle or defying his granduncle and not to taking on the world. That's why I think it doesn't land.
Just from that sentence there, people can see why I keep saying you have to be on acid to watch this movie. But I did say that it goes from being very confusing to being very straightforward in parts, but we've each watched this once. So in a weird way, we've watched it 3 times. And I feel like there will be people listening to this who've watched it several times and will be like, it's not that confusing. I kind of get what they're saying. When on my first time, I was like, why is there a parakeet guy chopping down all the stairs? That's a bit strange. Whereas now I understand it's a metaphor for that he wants to climb up and he's not allowed to climb up because I've just dropped down all the stairs. He's got no wings because it's Birdland.
So this bit here where we like the parakeet king is trying to get to the master before.
To be clear, the parakeets are like the newer antagonist once the Heron is actually finally doing his job and acting as a guide after they become friends, and Mahito plugs the hole he left him in his beak and he's able to turn into a Heron again. And then the parakeets come in and they look. Did you guys play Club Penguin?
No.
I know of Club Penguin.
Club Penguin was a silly game on I think it was Miniclip.
Yes, Miniclip.
You basically had a little. You had a world. It was like RuneScape, but not in a medieval world. You're a penguin who went into towns and you had little pets and stuff. The parakeets just look like the fat penguins from Club Penguin.
They do, but they kind of are menacing.
Kind of.
I mean, they are. Are
you scared of the parakeets?
But again, there's something
just kept
in this.
appearing, and then another one would appear, and it was really. I think they dealt with the tension really well. Like the first time we meet them, the Heron has led them away, but then he gets into the house. We find out that the blacksmith that he was meant to see is gone. Assumingly we're not told, but we know he's been murdered and eaten by the parakeets.
Eaten, I think, is the scariest bit.
Yeah, and then one parakeet's there, and then another one appears from off the side of the screen, and then two appear behind him at the door he's just come in, and he is surrounded by these giant parakeets that have a menacing look on their face. And then basically they say, we know where Natsuko is, we wouldn't eat her, she's pregnant, but you're not, so we will eat you. And they start to enclose on him. And then that's when, as Chandler mentioned before, Himi saves him with fire and transports him to her house, which was a lot safer and parakeetless. But I did write down that it's nice to know that's where the parakeets in London really came from.
What a time door in some weird tower in Japan.
Because we see them leave the world a little bit later and they turn into normal parakeets and shit everywhere.
True.
By the way, why do they keep shitting on everyone? The second they get out that door, have they been holding it? Are they allowed to shit in the kingdom? Maybe the second they get out that door, they just unleash on everyone.
Well, maybe not. Maybe they store their energy. We learn that food's hard to come by. There's a dying pelican that tells them with the reason we eat the wara, we don't want to, but our children are dying, and the master didn't leave us any food here. He creates a world of suffering.
That is the one bit I thought we wouldn't comment on, is the amount of shitting that the parakeets do.
It was a bizarre amount. I wrote it down. I was like, why do people keep getting covered in bird shit?
It was a viscerally realistic shit.
Like the dad's running to hug his son and just parakeets everywhere just shitting on him. I was like, this is horrendous.
So yeah, some of the parakeets escape when Himi is shown Mahito one of the exits and offering him the chance to leave, but he would have had to leave Natsuko there, which eventually he refuses to do. But his dad catches eyes with him. His dad runs up that hill and like almost falling over, runs on all fours, then runs up, and then absolutely pulls a freaking sword, a katana, out of his that he's stacked with him, and he just starts slicing apart these parakeets. And I think the only reason they live is because they go from their fat giant 7-foot selves to tiny little parakeets and shit all over him. But he was ready to slice. He didn't know if they were hostile, but he just goes in swinging.
He has never seen an American before. He could have assumed they were American soldiers coming out of that door.
He would have heard they're fat.
Nice.
Oh, fuck. Now we've just lost the American audience. Thanks, James. Thank you.
No, we don't have any US listeners. We have a Mexican and a Canadian. They'll love it.
No. I'd like to point out United States is actually our second highest country for listeners.
Oh, no.
We apologise. We will behead James.
Oh, say, can you see?
So now we get to the point where Mahito actually meets the master, and the master explains. We find out it's his granduncle, and he explains that this is his world, and he wants Mahito to be his successor, and it has to be someone from his bloodline. And Mahito sort of denies it and says, I can't use those stones because if I do it, I will affect my grief and despair onto the stones.
Yeah, he mentions that they're not wood. And I think that is a representation of we're shown repeatedly that Mahito ultimately values life. The pelicans, he was unhappy that they were killing the wara, but he still gives it a burial. And I think that was a turning point when the heron saw him bury the pelican. He was like, why are you doing this? But he does it anyway. He feels a sense of duty to do that. He uses a wooden sword in the movie, which is ultimately a non-violent weapon, non-lethal weapon for the most part compared to a real sword. He hit himself with a rock, and that rock is almost ultimately a self-harm and a symbol of his grief and his depression. And he sees the master has these building blocks that almost a children's toy, and he said he travelled through time and space of this world to find these blocks to build basically his Jenga, I guess ideal world. And ultimately Mahito, his Jenga. Mahito says there's malice or there's grief.
Malice, I think.
All over, all within these rocks, and I refuse to use them. And he refers to the rock. He whacked his health. By this point in the story, you're quite far along, and he is recognizing his grief and opening up a lot more.
Which I think is a good turning point for Mahito's story. However, in the actual story that we're watching, it's never explained because he's talking to his granduncle in one bit, And he says, no, I don't want to touch those. And the next scene, he's knocked out somewhere else. It's never explained how him and Himmy get knocked, going from his Grandmaster to being knocked out down the way. We get introduced to the Parakeet King, who I think is played by Dave Bautista in the English voice cast, which was very good.
Is he really?
The cast is, again, we said the cast in the English dub is absolutely stacked. You got Florence Pugh.
She does an outstanding job.
Gemma Chan is Natsuko. Dave Bautista is the Parakeet King. Shoichi Maki, which his dad is Christian Bale. The noble pelican that passed away is Willem Dafoe. Lady Himi is Karen.
He really?
Yeah. The Lady Himi is Karen Fukuhara from The Boys fame.
Robert Pattinson is the Grey Heron.
The Grey Heron.
Yeah.
And Mark Hamill is the grand uncle.
And Kiriko is played by the young Kiriko is played by Florence Pugh. She might also do the old one, the old Kiriko as well. So absolutely ridiculously stacked a movie. And to be honest, I was shocked. And my girlfriend goes, yeah, most of his movies have stacked English casts. Actually, I had no idea.
But anyway, we see now the Parakeets and the Parakeet King now are like, right, we're going to offer Lady Himi as a sacrifice, essentially, to the grand uncle to get what we want. But it's never really explained what the Parakeet King and the parakeets actually want. I assume just to survive.
Yeah, they just want to survive because they know the world's dying. When the Parakeet King gets to, well, it's hilarious to say, it sounds absolutely doolally, but there's talking animals in loads of films you watch, don't worry about it. The Parakeet King goes to see the Grand Master. They have a relationship. And ultimately the parakeets are only there because the master took them there. And he is almost, they feel like it's paradise. They actually walk to, the Parakeet King has obviously been there before, but he takes two of his soldiers to where the Grand Master is, and they're like, this is paradise. There's some of our ancestors. Which are just normal parrots, I think. And they're like, and they're crying. They are bawling with eyes out. They're just like, this is all we want. This is the world we want. And ultimately, the master says, I'm looking for a successor. The world is dying. And I need you to take over, Mahito. The Parakeet King, I guess we see at the end, he'll do that himself. He'd happily be the successor. He just doesn't want their world to die.
But then the grand uncle never explains that it can't be. It has to be someone of his bloodline. Yeah, which is like, I don't understand why the parakeets want to actually harm Mahito. They should, in theory, the Parakeet King should be the one who's like saying, Mahito, go be the successor. I want to stay alive. He
should try and convince him because the master does say, I'm going to let him go and take Natsuko and go.
Yeah.
But I think one thing, when he was trying to save Natsuko in that world, there's a huge scene where he's found her. Himi took him to her, and she said, the rocks don't want you to save her. And I've alluded to that is, so we're essentially led to be that the world is alive, and we know the rocks are kind of filled with malice. The world doesn't want to end itself, and it knows that ultimately if he takes Natsuko, he's going to leave, and he's not going to take over, and the world's going to fall apart, and everything's going to, ultimately the world of the grand uncle is going to fall apart. The world where also he could see his mum is going to fall apart. The world doesn't want to see it end, so it forces him out. That's where he has that dream, and he then, like you say, where he meets the Grand Master for the first time, and the parakeet, he wakes up back with the parakeets. And I just think throughout the movie, dreams were used as a link to this world with him and his bloodline, as he's had a couple when he was in the real world that seemed trippy.
So two things I want to say then. So is the first time that we see Mahito meeting the Grand Uncle, is that in a dream then? And not in reality, so. Mahito's... Yeah. Okay, that makes more... I'll be honest, that makes more sense.
From when he saved Natsuko.
Yeah. Okay, that makes more sense. I'll be honest. Second thing...
Alex looks dumbfounded. Look at him.
I honestly, I keep going back to what I said at the start. It's very confusing, then it's very straightforward. I'm so happy we had this conversation because I'm very confused.
So the second thing I was going to say is, did you not at one point think that when we knew that it had to be someone of his bloodline, that it was going to be Natsuko's child was going to be the successor. There was a thought in my head. It was like, that's where this film could be going. But obviously,
so he sacrifices his new step sibling.
But maybe that's why the parakeets are keeping her there.
That's why the parakeets didn't want to kill. That's why the parakeets didn't kill Natsuko and couldn't eat the baby.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We are smart. We are clever.
The scene when he tries to just track back a bit, because obviously his whole time there he's meant to save Natsuko, get her out. And the rocks are like zapping him with fire and electricity. They don't want him to. And then she is on a bed surrounded by these like hanging ornaments of paper. And when he's in there, the world is angry.
You say paper. I generally thought it looked like toilet paper, but carry on.
I think it might be a traditional ornament, but I don't know. But they're hanging down, and the wind is started to pick up, and they've basically come alive. They almost look like little alligator kind of heads, and they're attacking him and Natsuko. But Natsuko is screaming. We get a really appear into her character here. And his, I think it's a huge emotional moment. She's like screaming, like, "Go! I hate you!" And he starts calling her mum, or in my one, he starts doing casa, because casa means mum. But I don't know if in the English dub was he just shouting "mum."
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. He's acknowledging her as a mum. I think he needs a mum. And all while this is happening, she's screaming, "I hate you," but also wants him to get out and be safe at the same time. Because remember, for her, he is an image of her sister's death. He is a reminder of her sister's death and her responsibility to him. And also, she might see him as a stain on her new family with his dad. But all while we see this, Himi is watching. And I think it's just as an emotional moment for Himi, because after this, she says, "Natsuko, please leave take him as your son." Don't just take him out the world, but also take him as your son. Take my place. She's seen him accepting her as a mum. We've seen her express her true feelings, and Himi is then giving them the opportunity to grow and have that acceptance for each other and their new life, and to move on from her death.
I'm actually getting emotional hearing you explain this, because I watched it, and I honestly, I don't think I registered this whole sequence. But now that you're telling me, I'm just playing it back in my mind, and I won't lie, the Sweet Home Alabama is fading, and I want them to be a happy family.
I found that probably the most powerful scene in the movie on an emotional level.
I would agree with you. What, the bit at the end, or the bit?
No, the bit where
they're attacked by toilet paper.
Ironically, I think the most emotional scene is when they're being attacked by alligator toilet paper.
So I think it's more emotional. So after the Parakeet King has come in and destroyed the stones that the grand uncle was going to give Mahito to be the successor, the only thing I think, again, I disagree with Mahito's journey in this, is that ultimately the decision is kind of taken away from him. If the Parakeet King wasn't there and didn't destroy the stones, I think something else would have happened. I think the Parakeet King coming in and destroying the stones that the grand uncle was going to give to Mahito ultimately takes the urgency and the pressure of the decision away from Mahito.
He'd already decided.
He's already decided.
Before it twice.
No, fine. But in theory, because of the way the time of this world works and things like that, someone else could have come in, and another successor could have come in.
And
saved
had
the world.
It was going anyway.
Are you annoyed that
I just think
democracy failed?
Wasn't democracy. It was, if anything, it was crowning the son as king. If anything,
but the king of the parakeets wanted to take over.
He wasn't voted for.
He wanted to call for everyone else. He was a dictator.
I just think having the Parakeet King destroy the world sort of takes the urgency out a little bit. But anyway, we can
maybe
move
it
on
takes it
from
out
that.
a little bit. I disagree that it takes it out because he has decided twice he wants nothing to do with the rocks. This is not.
Yeah.
He wants to go back to the real world, even at the threat of the grandma saying your world will burn, and also we know it's in wartime, and it won't last.
Yeah.
But he wants to be with his family. He has taken this journey of grief and began to accept the life he has and where he wants to be. He doesn't want to sit in a lonely world and make this faux paradise for himself where he can bottle up his grief and hide it behind ultimately his perfect world. He doesn't want to do that.
Which again can be seen as his ego. And I actually, as you say that more, I think that does land a little.
Because the Grandmaster says it is that you can have paradise, but it's not real.
But I think the most again, going back to what I was really saying, I think the most emotional moment is after this when they're all running away and
the world's falling apart.
Apart and they're trying to find the correct door to go through to go back to their own times. And I think that conversation of Himi actually saying to Natsuko, take him, be his mother, let him be your son. Yeah. I'm going to go back and unfortunately die in the hospital. But
she says she doesn't care, does she?
Yeah, exactly. But as you said, as I said earlier, the old ladies said that she came back happier after she went missing for a year and a half. She came back happier, so you can see all that journey, and I think it's really nice. And I think that's a really big emotional moment. However, in saying that, I think the next 90 seconds after that happens and they all come back, I think the film really ends on a weird note of just a line of dialogue of. And 2 years later, after the war finished, we moved back to Tokyo. I don't understand that line.
Why?
Yeah,
I like how it actually because you've watched the movie. The movie is now over. They could have just ended it with he reunites with his dad.
Exactly, and I think that would have been a more emotional ending.
That goes back maybe to the director basing it on real life experience, where he did move out to a country. To live with his auntie and probably cousin brothers.
Sweet.
And then at the end of the war, moved back.
So on that end scene, and I think the reason I like that they go back to Tokyo and it's 2 years on. So when they leave the world, the pelican is saying, do you remember? And he goes, yes. And he's like, that's really bad. People don't remember this world. And normally forgetting what happened in movies such as this really annoys me because does it necessarily emotionally put you back on square one? However, in movies when someone special has passed away, you getting over it or dealing with your grief or accepting it is often led to almost like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I recommend anyone listen to how Andrew Garfield talks about grief in the death of his mother because it's all about remembrance. And
being happy that it happened. And I think a lot of films get that wrong, whereas I think here, he begs his mum to stay, even though she's not really his mum. It's a girl the same age as him, and she hasn't had that experience in her own life yet. He still wants her there. It's not just letting go and forgetting about her. But then, and as leaving the world, I like that he remembers partly because of that. But also, even if he did forget, you mentioned the mum came back happy. It's almost like he's gone through the stages of grief and he's come out the other side of grief and acceptance, and his mum is a fond memory. And then to cap that, going back to Tokyo is going back to the place they left, the place where she died, the place where they all ran away from. Yeah, I can agree with that. However, ultimately, I think it might have been a bit better then if. So, what age are we led to believe Mahito is in the main of the film? 12, 13, right?
10. Yeah, he's 10. I would have said 10 or 11.
Boy. Okay, let's say 10, right?
Adolescence.
But to quote a phrase, anime 10.
Okay, fine.
They're 10, but they act 18 years old.
Yeah. So they all move back as a family, which I think is nice. However, if we're thinking of just Mahito's journey, it would have been better if they said at the age of 18, when I became a man, I moved to Tokyo, instead of basically ultimately it wouldn't have been Mahito's decision to move back to Tokyo. It would have been his dad's, right?
So he's 12, 11. He's 11.
Okay, fine. So he would have been 15 at that end scene where it's like 2 years after the war, we moved back to Tokyo. So ultimately, it's not his decision. It would have been his dad and his stepmom's, right? So, yeah, so it would have been better if they said at the age of 18, like everyone else decided to stay in the countryside, but me, when I had the choice, I moved back to Tokyo.
I like what you're saying.
But
I liked James's version more because it gave me feelings. Yours is just entirely logical. James's was very. I felt the emotion. I'm a little bit choked up now.
Guys, it's about that time. I think we've talked about Mahito's story enough. Again, a bit like Almost Famous. I hope listeners at home, I hope you're enjoying these slightly more serious movies and how we're tackling them. We do feel like we have to approach them a little bit differently than...
That will change next week.
don't worry about that. That's going to change. Or maybe we do try to do a silly movie series. That could be fun. Anyway, it's that time, as always. Let's move on to our 3 takes. Alex, you said off pod that you would like to go first.
I would like to go for. I have some very not as stirring as your words, but I have some words that we can stir.
Please.
As I said at the start, that my view on the storyline is still very confusing, very very linear at some points. But obviously, you two have explained it to me, and I've put more pieces together. I think I would watch this again, even though the Heron's terrifying. I would watch this again to put more of the story together. Visually, it's, as we said, it's a spectacular view. If you watch it on a big enough screen, if you watch it on your phone on a plane on a flight from Dublin, maybe it's not as visually captivating, but it is just fantastic. And I think it did, like we talk about like coming of age and what things that entails. As we've said in this, grief is like a huge part of the movie. It's sort of what drives him, and everyone has to go through it. Not everyone lives forever. I will, but other people won't.
Alex siphons the grief of others, and it empowers him.
And yet, there's always that want to put things back to the way they were, and that happens quite a lot in this film. The mum is there. He wants to bring her back. She can't come back. The pregnant lady has ran away to the little castle to try and make sure that she stays in her pregnant ways. But in the end, he has to come out of the magic world and move on, like we all do.
I'll be completely honest. I was actually genuinely ready to come on this record and kind of slate this film. I'll be completely honest. Watching it, I did not enjoy it. I think this film, I feel, having spoken about it now for the past hour, I think this film should lean to be watched multiple times to really get what's going on. And I think you guys have made me see more of the emotional points in the film. However, in saying all that, unless you're made to watch this film for a podcast, I wouldn't recommend it to people watching it. I think there are better films that get the point across about grief and about how you need to move on, be happy with the time that has happened, and unfortunately be happy with the time that you had with your loved ones, but now it's time to move on. I think that point gets across to you better in other films. In saying that, the film is beautiful to look at. The music is done really well. I do not think this film should have won the Best Animated Feature Oscar, especially in the category that Across the Spider-Verse was in as well. So that is my overall take on the film. I think if you are going to watch it, you need to watch it multiple times to really understand what's going on, or have a movie podcast where you discuss it for an hour with your friends. So yeah, I think, as I said, it's a very confusing story in some points, a simple story in some points. And I think the whole point of the film and the message and the coming of age story it's trying to tell you about grief comes across, I think, is done better in other films.
I don't disagree with Chandler wholeheartedly in the sense of I wouldn't recommend this film to just anyone. The movie is a hard watch. I do disagree on saying there are necessarily better films. Just hanging on the word better films that explain the journey of grief. This is an abstract movie. You have to accept it for what it is. It is an abstract movie that is not spoon feeding you. It's metaphors, what it's representing, and what you're meant to take from what you're shown. When you boil it down, it is a simple story of a young boy who's lost his parent, who needs to go on a journey to let go, move on, and deal with his grief. If you take it as simply as that, and then you will enjoy it, and you will be drawn in by his story, and I think you'll be blown away. And I honestly mean this. If you think you've seen a beautiful movie, this is absolutely stunning. Any wide shot or even any interior shot of a house in this film could be artwork on a wall. It is absolutely stunning. Spider-Verse, I do agree, could have easily won the Oscar. It did have pioneering animation in its own right, and that's why it took so many years to make. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that this won it either. It's up to more important people than us to discover. But researching this movie, find out that Miyazaki has a lot of his own life experience in this movie, and he is 83, 84 years old. Supposedly, this movie was a way for him to say, Grandpa is moving on to the next world, and this is what he's leaving behind for his grandson. I will admit, when I finished the film, although I understood what the story was for Mojito and how he had to grow up through this film, what he had to encounter, not all of it made sense to me. And it only takes 2 minutes to search The Boy and the Heron Explained to get, honestly, a lot of helpful, more intelligent film analysts than us to really deeply read into the metaphors of the movie and help you explain some things. And some of that I'm quite proud of myself that I came to myself, but a lot of it I definitely didn't. It was tough to come to those conclusions. However, by the end of the film, I do think you have a good grasp of his story, regardless of how abstract the world is, or regardless how abstract the story is. I think it was a beautiful story. So it actually, within the last week, unfortunately, my partner has had a family bereavement, and the movie comes at a time to really think about legacy and what you leave behind. And I do think it does it beautifully, and it doesn't have to spoon feed you. And I think it allows you to think and to just kind of be absorbed into another world, which is not just beautiful, but goofy and but heartbreaking at points. So yeah, I'm really glad I've watched it. I wanted to watch it when it came out in the cinema. Gutted I didn't see those beautiful set pieces on the big screen. But yeah, I really, really did like it. And I will now be making sure to watch plenty more of Miyazaki's other Studio Ghibli movies, because they're all meant to be stunning.
Alex, take us out.
Well then, that's us out of the door and covered in parakeet doo-doo. That was The Boy and the Heron. And I think 2 messages to take from that fantastic film was, you should probably watch it on drugs, and don't believe James when he calls us actual movie analysts. We're not.
I don't think I did. I think I said we definitely are.
We are not. We're not. Join us next week when we continue to grow up and watch the troublesome cult classic American Pie. It's goodbye from James.
Bye.
It's goodbye from Chandler.
Goodbye.
And because I'm cultured, it's sayonara from me.
Ooh, by the way, sayonara is a goodbye used if you're never going to see someone again.
Sayonara.
Correct. Sayonara, fuckers.
Don't forget to rate, review, and share the podcast. It really helps us grow. Follow us on all our socials, plus our individual Letterboxd accounts. The links can be found in the description at www.hopwith2ps.bio/3takes, or search for 3 Takes of Stupidity on most platforms. Please send us your film and series suggestions on our Hop page, or to 3takesofstupidity@gmail.com. Thank you, and hope to see you soon.